If you are an expat and you would love top-notch advice on your CV interview or how to land exactly the job that you want, I have got something special for you. Hi, and welcome to the interview. Anna Sparks is here with us today. Anna, thank you so much for calling in from Quito. Is that right?
Yeah, thanks for having me, Sunday.
Okay, so you guys, Anna is such a treat to have with us today. Let me tell you a little bit about her. Anna is the absolute go-to person when it comes to finding a job abroad and understanding how can you take your real life experience and frame it in a way that future employers really get it and see your experience as an asset and not as a barrier or something they don't understand. I have watched Anna in action. She is really impressive. A no BS, straight to the point, clear person around what's happening, completely authentic, and when I say no BS, I mean the resumes speak for real experience, not made up to sound like some other experience, right? And just a pleasure to work with as well. So Anna, thank you for joining us. Have I represented your experience in a way that seems accurate?
Even better than I could have done myself. Thanks, Sunday.
I cannot say the praises of Anna enough. I know people who've also worked with her, and they're just impressed from A to Z. So we are so lucky to have her join us today. Thank you. Today we are talking about, there are some really important things when you are an expat. And let's say your company partner, your partner has the assignment and you join and you're looking for work, or you're the expat who's trying to find the assignment. It is not always easy to find the right match. So when you're looking for support, there are some important questions to ask. So Anna has agreed to come with us. And I would like to know, Anna, how do we get started? So if you are an expat and you are overwhelmed by this global job search, how do you get started?
That's a great question, Sunday. I mean, once you open up your oyster to the whole entire world, to every country, everywhere, sometimes it can be really overwhelming in terms of what direction should I go? Versus if you're from London and you know you're always going to look in London, that reigns in your job search, right? So it's definitely a challenge as an expat to figure out where's the right place to go next. But a lot of times you're going to narrow those things down on your own, right? Based on certain factors, obviously. What do my kids need? They need to be at an international school. They need these special services. They need this right kind of healthcare. Narrow down the countries or the cities that are available to you based on that. Then also, we all have particular skills that we bring to the table. So a lot of us have experience in particular regions, right? Which really makes us an asset. So that's one thing that you want to look at as the expat who's leading the job search, or even as the quote unquote trailing spouse, right? Is where do I add value? What regions, what languages, what cultures do I know better than anyone else that's going to give me a leg up in the job search? So you really want to kind of focus on those particular things. And if you are an expat, let's say, who really has dreams of going and working in Asia, but you don't really have any experience there, then that's one thing that you can kind of put on your list to figure out, how do I get some professional experience there? Do I try to get a short-term assignment with my current company? Do I try to take a different position that I might not have had on my radar before just to get that experience in that region so I can parlay it into the next thing? Does that make sense?
Right. So it sounds like stop the overwhelm, narrow down based on what you really want, and then look from there.
Exactly.
Very good. Okay, so one of the things that's challenging as an expat spouse, or someone who goes along, is that there might be gaps in the work history, purely from transitioning from point A to point B. You might have to go back and learn a language. Maybe you've had kids. This is also true for people who are not traditional expats on rotational assignments, but people who live abroad and might be moving to be with their partner who live in that local country. So what do you do about those gaps?
Great question. I mean, first of all, I want to put it out there that if your gap is less than a year, don't sweat it. Because there's a lot of people that come to me and like, I haven't worked in 4 months. What do I do? not a big deal. It's okay to have taken a little bit of time off to figure stuff out, to move. That happens in everyone's quote unquote normal career, even if you're not an expat. So if it's a less than a year, just knock it off the table. Don't worry about it.
Okay.
But if it's more than a year, if you're an expat, or even if you are a parent who has taken off the first 3, 4, 5, 12 years of your child's life in order to stay at home with them, you have to figure out how you're going to present that to employers in a way that, number one, they understand, and number two, they find valuable, right? Mm-hmm. So that's the really key message that I'd like some of the viewers today to take away is you always want to present something in a way that is valuable to your employer. So I'm not going to say if I was a stay-at-home mom, I drove my kids to school every day. Mm-hmm. If my new job has nothing to do with driving my kids to school. However, if I was on a fundraising committee at my child's school and I'm going now to try for a fundraising job, then maybe that's something I do want to bring up. Okay. Now, when I talk about bringing stuff up, there's a really key places to do it. You really don't want to do it on your resume. So a lot of people kind of doubt whether they should write on their resumes for the reason that they have a gap, right? Mm-hmm. That's not really the place to put it. If you have some volunteer experience, like a fundraising committee for a particular nonprofit organization, and you want to put that under volunteer experience in your resume, you can do that. But you don't really want to address head-on the gap in your resume. Where you do want to address it absolutely head-on is in your cover letter. Because that's the place that you have a paragraph to give them the full information that they need about it. Mm-hmm. Something like this. In one of your paragraphs on your resume, you may have noticed that I have not been in the formal workforce since 2007. The reason for this is I chose to stay home to raise my children, and now I'm very excited to get back to work. Why does this benefit your employer? Usually, after those gaps, usually it benefits your employer because, number one, you're super excited to get back to work, right? You're not the person who's just been climbing the career ladder and might be burnt out. You're the person that's like, I am dying to get back into the office. I am dying to show you what I can do, right?
Yeah, right.
So automatically you have an advantage because you're excited. Whereas those people who are just going from marketing assistant to marketing manager, they're like, yeah, this is my career, whatever. It's not that same thing. And then also you can probably pull in certain things based on that particular gap in what you were doing during that time, right? Okay. So maybe you were traveling a lot and you were blogging, and now you're going to a role where you're being asked to write creatively sometimes. Mm-hmm. Let's tell them about that in the cover letter. Don't just leave that to the side because it is super relevant to the role that you're applying for. Right. But don't tell them about blogging if you're going to a very, sort of narrow engineering role. Right. That's not relevant to them. Does that make sense?
Right. So if for example, someone has chosen to stay at home for 2 years to be with their child, and let's say they've made the decision and but they want to be really smart about how to spend the next 2 years, even though they've chosen to stay at home, what would you say that they should be doing to make the transition to the next employer easier?
Great question. Well, a couple things. Number one, let's first recognize that staying home with a child who's 0 to 2 doesn't usually leave you that much time to invest in anything else.
True.
So I'm not going to say crazy stuff, right?
Right.
I'm going to try to say something. First of all, you want to make sure 2 things that I think don't take too much time. Number one, you want to maintain your networks. So those people that were in that company that you worked for before, don't lose track of them over the next 2 years. Mm-hmm. And even if don't lose track of them means stay up with what they're doing on Facebook or LinkedIn, right? Mm-hmm. Something as simple as that, where you're on for 5 or 10 minutes anyway that day, check in with Susie and Bob and John, who were your favorite people that you worked with at your job that you left before you went to have a baby, right? Mm-hmm. Second, you want to stay up on industry news. Again, this can be as simple as subscribing to a publication, deciding to check some professional association's website once a week. If you're so inclined, reading some kind of academic paper that might have been written about your particular field, right? And that all depends on what your field is, how you're going to get this information. Mm-hmm. But staying keyed into what's going on and some of the changes that might have happened in your field is really important, because you don't want to lose that confidence that you have in yourself, that you know what's going on. Because years from now,
because
you've not only had babies spit up on you all the time,
right? And then
but you feel not connected to your field.
Yeah, people start to feel like, oh, I've been out for too long. I don't know if I can do it. So what I'm hearing you say is, if you stay up to date, then your confidence will stay strong. And
Absolutely.
that I'm sure you're going to tell me that it's probably one of the most important things you can have going into interview is confidence.
That's right. The person who is the most confident is the one who gets the job. It's not the person who has the best skills. Mm-hmm. And we always forget that, right? Especially, this might be a little stereotypical, but it's very true of women in particular. When they go into an interview, they don't feel comfortable overselling themselves, which sometimes causes people to undersell themselves. But having that right appropriate amount of confidence, not cockiness, but confidence is really key in an interview.
Research coming out from, I think Harvard does the book Women Don't Ask. There's some researchers coming out of there that talk about how women undersell their skills. They feel like they need to have 100% match to a profile, when men would say 60% is enough to apply. Absolutely. That's good. So huge takeaways already are, if you're on a gap, whether it's for family or a timeout or to travel, invest 5 to 10 minutes a week or a day to keep up with your network and keep up with the industry. Super doable, super tangible. Like, it does not take a lot of time. So that's excellent. Yeah. And if you find yourself, let's say, with 2 extra hours a week, or you have a way to swap childcare services or something with somebody, and you can find a little time to do something else, the thing you might want to consider is, number one, expanding that network, right? Mm-hmm. So going to additional events, trying to meet new people in your field, etc., with an eye towards 2 years from now when you're ready to go back. Or number two, it could be both or, doing something on a volunteer basis, right? Mm-hmm. So whether that is finding an organization that you've already been working with, or you've already always really admired, and let's say you're a bookkeeper, and I'd be happy to help you keep your book hours, or I'd like to teach a class to your benefit on or on financial, family budgeting or whatever. But you can add that in if you have the time for it, but don't demand that of yourself, especially when you have a new baby. Yeah, I think that's really important, because then you might not have the motivation to go back to work if you're sort of overwhelmed with the whole transition. That makes sense. Totally. What about the expat context where a partner can't work because of the legal restrictions in an area? Yeah, that's really tricky. I mean, okay, a couple things. Number one is, as an expat spouse, you really want to make sure that you're informed about what your career could look like in this next step for your spouse, right? So I know many spouses who have gotten surprised by that after they moved somewhere. They thought they were going to be able to work on the local market, and then they were told that they couldn't. And that feels really bad. Mm-hmm. So it's really different to be surprised by the fact that you can't work, or to consciously go into the situation knowing I'm not going to work, I'm not going to take paid employment over the next 3 years, but I am going to focus on my career in this way over the next 3 years, mm-hmm. right? So there's a couple different things you can do if you can't work. Number one is you could always pursue additional education, right? So you could, we're so lucky as expats now compared to 20 years ago that we can pursue online degrees, take free courses on Coursera. We can do so many things to better ourselves, to learn new skills if we're not able to work in the location where we are. Yeah. Now, different countries are different. Sometimes those work restrictions also include restrictions on volunteering or interacting in the community where you are. Mm-hmm. Now, if that's your case, you might want to consider interacting a little bit more online in another community, right? Mm-hmm. So if there are a group of, let's say, public relations professionals in Chicago where you're from, maybe you want to get on there on Facebook and you want to be helping people with their problems. You want to do a little pro bono help for this woman who's starting her new cupcake business or whatever it is, right? So make sure you're continuing to practice those skills, even if it's not right in front of you. Yeah. If you don't have that restriction on volunteering that sometimes goes along with the restriction on working, find an organization that can really use your particular skills. Mm-hmm. So this is a big mistake that I see expat spouses making when they're not working for whatever reason. Mm-hmm. Is they go to a local organization that they like, mm-hmm. and they do something that's not at all in line with their skill set. Yeah, I even did myself at one point, right? In Malawi, I volunteered at an orphanage, and I was holding babies and playing with kids and etc. And I'm fine at that, but that has nothing to do with my professional background. And I probably could have offered much better services by helping the employees there design systems, mm-hmm. or run more smoothies, set up some routines, help them figure out how to
individuals who were visiting this orphanage but never thought about making a financial donation, which could have really helped them, right? So I wasn't really keyed in at that point to giving them the best of myself that allows me to use the really good professional skills I have, and even benefits them much more than anything I could do holding a baby, right? Just because that's not my particular skill set. Other people, that might be their skill set.
Yeah. I'm going to repeat that in case the connection was bad and people couldn't hear the recording, about when you go into a volunteer environment, instead of just volunteering, doing whatever it is, think about what you can do best that would add the most value. And I think the prerequisite for that is to really be mindful, what are my skills? What am I really good at? And how can that add value? Because I do think that even though it sounds quite simple, people get overwhelmed with the entire transition, especially if it's their first assignment abroad, or if the cultural context is highly demanding in the first 6 months, that people kind of get sucked in. You get sucked into the PTA, you get sucked into the volunteer place A, B, or C, and you forget to step back and say, what is the absolute best use of my skills? Meaning not just for you, but for the people you want to serve. Mm-hmm. So we talked a lot about the accompanying partner. Now let's talk about the one who's looking for the assignment, or is an independent, individual on their own. If they are in an organization and have been, let's say, with them for 8, maybe 12 years, and you're looking to break away from that organization, but you still want to be working abroad, what should an individual like that be doing?
So if you are already working for an international organization, you have the great benefit of having an excellent network of other people that you know who work for other international organizations, right? Almost any of us who have worked for an international organization have not only worked for, let's say, the Swiss government, right? Like, we know the people who work for the American government, the British government, these 17 different international development organizations, this oil company, this tobacco company, this other, you know what I mean? Like, we're in that world. Yeah. And so just as you would when you're looking for a new position in another professional environment, you do the same thing as an expat. You begin to talk to people about what you're looking for next. So you call on maybe first your closest friend and you say, hey, listen, I've been working for Care International for 12 years, and I'd really like to make a switch. I don't really feel like I want to work in the NGO world. I really feel like I want to go to the private sector. I've seen you working for Coca-Cola International, and would you mind just kind of sharing with me what are some of the differences you've seen between the NGO sector and the private sector? How does Coca-Cola recruit? Are there other people that I should be talking to? So you begin that networking process, but you have this insane advantage of most likely definitely having worked with those people, but then also being friends with those people. Yeah, right. So talk to them as your friend. This doesn't have to be that hardcore, uncomfortable networking thing. This is seriously information gathering. How do I make the next step forward? How do I step out of this and go to the next thing?
Yeah. And I think that is, again, it makes so much sense, but people can easily get trapped in, I'm going to go online and look for what's out there. And they completely miss the human element. And I mean, I know in the Swiss context, for example, you get jobs. It's not nepotism, like you get jobs based on who you know, but it's about trust. It's about, I know this person, I know they can perform. And if you work in a really high demand expat context, you need people you can depend on, and you'd rather take someone that you know rather than someone you never, no context of.
Absolutely. I mean, we're human beings. This is our nature, is to be more comfortable with things that we're familiar with, right? And so even if I only know your name, Sunday, and your resume comes in, I'm more likely to pull Sunday's resume in order to put her in the interview pile versus the other people that I'm like, I'm not going to talk to them, only because somebody said, watch for Sunday's resume. She's a really good candidate. Just take a harder look at it. That's all the person has to say. And then all of a sudden I'm like, okay, keyed into Sunday. Let me check that out. Right. And you have to remember that these international positions are really highly sought after. Unless you're going to one of these extreme war zones, there are a lot of candidates for most of these positions.
Yeah, right.
In order to stand out, you can have a really compelling resume. And if you have that on top of somebody knowing your name, you're probably going to get an interview. And that's where you can really establish rapport and convince them that they are the right person for the position.
Oh my gosh, I could talk to you for hours, and I know you have so much more to share. Tell me, Anna, how can people get a hold of you if they would like your support in their resume, nailing the interview, or in the job search? What's the next step?
Sure. Yeah, you can reach out to me. I have a Facebook page, Anna Sparks Coaching, or you can go on my website, anna-sparks.com, and just hit me up. I'd love to hear whatever questions you have. I'd love to hear what you're struggling with, and we'll figure out how to work forward together.
Okay, well, I'll make sure that I put that in the description of YouTube and in my newsletter so people can be in touch. Can you leave our listeners with one small but powerful tip that they can do to make sure that they're on track for their job search?
Yes. The number one tip that I give my clients is to know your audience. So as you're crafting all of your job search materials, your resume and your cover letter, and as you're thinking about how am I going to respond to certain questions in an interview, remember who you're talking to. Remember what they need to know about you, not necessarily what you want to tell them about you.
Mm-hmm. Great. Okay. Thank you, Anna. And you'll be hearing more from Anna in the future. I'm sure if you're looking online, check her out on LinkedIn. She has a very strong and valuable presence. So thank you, Anna, for your time. And good luck. Take care.
Bye.